All right, everybody. Welcome to the Along the Watchtower podcast. It is Thursday, December 31st, 2020. It's New Year's Eve. And I don't honestly care. Honestly, my whole thing about it, excuse me, I don't party anymore, at least not like that. Like, I'll dance the night away with you, we can go on a trip. But I don't drink. I'm not a fan of bars. I like clubs. I like music. I like to move. I like movement. I like engagement. I'm not a big small talker. There's far too much that has happened, is happening, and will happen, not only in this country, but on this planet, and really in the vastness of the cosmos, to just like sit and talk about, your favorite ice cream or your why you miss sports. I mean, actually, that can be valid. We can talk about sports as it used to be, because like sports back in don't even see it as a sorry, but it's an exciting. I don't want to make death seem exciting. It's a part of life, but it being alive, being actually aware of the chaos and macabre, of the possibilities, both good and bad, and kind of seeing it in this maelstrom of potentialities. It's a fascinating thing. Life is fascinating. Humans are fascinating creatures in that we do all that we can, despite all that we have, to destroy everything around us. But yeah, I feel good. There are some decent things happening. Stimulus has come out, as meager as it was. We applaud the attempt of Sanders and Hawley to try and get that raised to 2,000. Unfortunately, McConnell, in his infinite strategery, managed to tie the 2,000 extra. So Senator Hawley and Sanders had their thing. Then they passed it. Then there was an attempt by the House as a whole to do it again. They did it again. They passed it for a $2,000 check stimulus separate from the omnibus bill. What McConnell did was tie it to Trump's election fraud committee. He requested an election fraud committee and a repeal of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. In tying it to that, he pretty much doomed it, because no one definitely is going to give him an election fraud committee. But a lot of and so here's the thing. I think you might be able to sway a few Republicans into a 230 repeal, at least not a full repeal, but you might sway them into discussing something about that, but you're not going to get an election fraud committee. No, the GOP want to rid themselves of Trump as soon as possible for good reasons. Some reasons good, some reasons, political in nature. But there's no way he's going to get anyone to sign on to that. So Trump is now put in this position. McConnell passed it back to Trump. McConnell's like, nice one, guy. And so now you have this situation where Trump has to, rescind his request for an election fraud commission and repeal of 230. Because remember, he vetoed the NDAA, right? It's these two bills, the omnibus, well, three technically, omnibus, stimulus, and the NDAA. He vetoed the NDAA, citing a repeal of 230, things like language that in the bill that allows them to rename any sort of military building, any base that's been named after a Confederate officer, things like that. And then you have the election fraud committee request. And so McConnell reached over to the NDAA, which he supported passing, right? And remember, his whole thing is about posterity. You passed the NDAA for 60 years, for 6 decades. We need to uphold that tradition. We read that here on the show. So he reached over to the NDAA, pulled over the 230 repeal, reached over here to the election, pulled over the election fraud committee, and then reached over to the 2000 stimulus that the House passed after the 600 stimulus, and latched those together, right? And so now Trump has to rescind 230 repeal request, and there's a request for an election committee, or we're all bonkered. We're all bonkered anyway. We're giving, the $600 checks have already begun to go out on Tuesday. So what are they going to do? They're going to retroactively give you $1,400. I mean, the IRS was able to gear up and give you $600 checks very quickly. So, I mean, it's possible. Anything's possible, especially with a fiat currency. I bring up fiat currency and anything being possible because we had the Force the Vote town hall. I didn't even know this was a thing happening. In the Force the Vote town hall, Jimmy Dore, Kyle Zelensky, Crystal Ball, I wonder if Sajar was there. Probably not, because he's the conservative. But and Jimmy Dore was there, obviously. And they talked about trying to force Medicare for all, the vote on the House, and why you should. And we'll talk about that in a bit, because surprise, surprise, drug companies are going to be hiking up their prices for 2021. Says Reuters. Excuse me. But we really, this is unbelievable. There's a lot happening. Before we get really into it, please like, share, and subscribe. If you like what I'm doing, share the video, subscribe to the channel. I could always use the support. And coming next year, there's going to be a lot of great things to come, probably sooner than you think. But yeah, we will, continue into the ether ever forward, for sure. That said, let's get into it. Microsoft says hackers viewed its source code. Now, I'm not a coder, but I do know that source code is proprietary information and is very important. With a source code, I mean, you could, I would guess hypothetically, take elements of the code, manipulate it, and have a copy of things, which is what the Chinese do. I wonder if that helps. Circumstantial, but I wonder if that helps give us an idea of what's going on. So this hack was widespread. It went through everywhere from the Department of Energy, excuse me, to the DoD, and apparently Microsoft. And so we really haven't seen a lot of information as of late come out as to what sort of information may have been relegated from that from that hack. Nor have we really, all we've really seen is like the fingers being pointed as to who the culprits could be, and or who is sort of stymieing or hanging up the response. But CNN reads, Microsoft said Thursday that the suspected Russian hackers behind a massive U.S. government security breach also viewed some of the company's source code. And by the way, we haven't really been given any evidence. And of course, we're not within intelligence organizations. We cannot know for sure the information that's being passed along amongst channels within. However, with all of the information that's being given and cited by defense officials, Pentagon officials, intelligence officials throughout, mainstream media, you would think that they would be chomping at the bit to kind of give us a blow-by-blow as to how they came to the conclusions that it was Russian hackers, that it was Fuzzy Bear, Cozy Bear. It was Cozy Bear. I don't know if you guys recall, if you ever saw on CNN back when, I want to say back in 2016 when Trump won, where they did a piece about how hackers can leave trails, digital trails, that really can, in this day and age, can really point to any country. So, intelligence officials, law enforcement officials, and just investigatory bodies in general, when they go through digital information, are always weary to jump to conclusions initially, given how easy it is to falsify information. However, to continue, the unauthorized access does not appear to have compromised any Microsoft services or customer data, the company said in a blog post. But an investigation showed that the hackers took advantage of the access to Microsoft systems to view company code. We detected unusual activity with a small number of internal accounts, and upon review, we discovered one account had been used to view source code in a number of source code repositories. The account did not have permissions to modify any code or engineering systems, and our investigation further confirmed no changes were made. These accounts were investigated and remediated. The disclosure highlights the broad reach of the attackers, whom investigators have described as extremely sophisticated and well-resourced, state-sponsored. And it suggests that corporate espionage may have been as much a motive as a hunt for government secrets. So perhaps not necessarily state-sponsored, maybe private. Source code represents the basic building blocks of computer programs. They are the instructions written by programmers that make up an application or computer program. Microsoft had previously acknowledged using the IT management software SolarWinds Orion that gave the attackers a potential window into thousands of public and private sector organizations. But this marks the first time Microsoft has confirmed that the attackers exploited the vulnerability against the technology giant. Mike Chappelle, a former National Security Agency official and an information technology professor at the University of Notre Dame, said the attackers were likely looking for potential security vulnerabilities in Microsoft products that they could exploit to gain access to users of those products. Cybersecurity professionals need to be concerned that the information falling into the wrong hands might create the next SolarWinds level vulnerability in a Microsoft product, Chappelle said. But Microsoft said its security practices begin by preemptively assuming that hackers already have access to the company's source code and protects its services accordingly. We do not rely on the secrecy of source code for the security of products, and our threat models assume that attackers have knowledge of the source code, so viewing source code isn't tied to elevation of risk. Well, ho, ho, ho. No, that's good. You prepare for the worst. Again, I'd love to have an idea of how they come to the conclusion, because they came to the conclusion immediately that it was the Russian hacker group Cozy Bear, and I'm like, I've never even heard of Cozy Bear, and I'd like to know how you came to that conclusion. But as usual, we're told a narrative and never explained what happened. We're just told that's what it is, and to move on. But as always, I will, check in and see what information is always available about it. But that's pretty much all that there is at this point. All right. So to continue in the world of technology, EV battery prices have plunged 89% in 10 years. I've always wanted, I'll be real with you, I will be alive for the proliferation of Minority Report like vehicle systems, where the automation of like intra highway and highway systems will be coming sooner than you think, where it's one of those things where the suggestion and push for like automated transportation of goods, right? Large, 18-wheelers being, and that's what the company Nikola was supposed to be for, right? The automation of large 18-wheelers, I think, would be better supported if we had highway systems to support them, right? And I'm not sure if it would be like Minority Report, where they would rebuild the highway system, because if you saw the movie Minority Report, they had, systems integrated into buildings, and, parking lots were integrated into streets, which were integrated into buildings, and everything pretty much was on one track splitting off. And that would take an entire renovation. I don't necessarily mean something like that, but can you imagine, right, where every quarter mile it would be some sort of system, like a physical unit placed there to like talk to the RFID or whatever system was on board the automated trucking system, right? And now this would also happen to work and correlate with individual vehicles, and all this leading the way to automation. And the first step to that is making batteries much more efficient. If you guys recall, I believe it was Boston Dynamics, they had the little automated dog that had the mule system. Because everyone's, the future is now. And so we have exoskeletal suits for the military. We have flying cars. Japan came out with the first commercially available flying car. The problem is that there's no like route system. You don't have, helipads really is what they would amount to. You don't have landing pads everywhere, refueling systems, stuff like that. So until the support systems become prolific, the units themselves will not become popular. But I saw this, the EV battery prices, and for viewers won't be able to see this, but it's the Boston Dynamics robot, and it might dance for me if my internet were good enough. It might not. It's the like I was saying, the mule dog. Oh, there we go. And so that dog is now much more sophisticated, as I've seen. It also was featured in the show World of Worlds, right? So, you already know, great, now robots have better moves than me. It's a tweet. But, they now have a bipedal chassis. Actually, they've had it for a while. And the bipedal chassis is moving, and they're dancing. The robots are now much more sophisticated. The dog chassis is called a Spot. It's $75,000. It's actually relatively cheap. Yeah, see, and somebody just said it is Boston Dynamics. Yeah, the big dog, the Boston Dynamics dog. It is Boston Dynamics. Yes, that dog has come a long way. These dogs are ambulating and dancing. They're dancing better than most people. I'd say they dance about as good as I do, right? Because I'm a little stiff, the hip replacements and stuff. I'm all right though. I can do a little slide, break dance a little bit. But yeah, it is fascinating to see the march of technology. So about EV batteries, and yes, for viewers, you did just see a glimpse into the Skynet future. The price of lithium-ion battery packs used to power an electric vehicle has plunged 89% in the last decade. It could drop even further in the next couple of years, allowing automakers to manufacture mass-market electric vehicles for the same cost as ones that run on petrol. Of course, the environmental impacts are nothing to thumb your nose at. The future that Greta Thunberg, right, Thunberg, is looking for is right around the corner. And that's the thing. It isn't about a mass cessation all at once. It is about introducing a better alternative. People will go to the better thing if you, A, explain to them why, and B, can prove that it works, and then C, make it affordable, especially given the middle class is dead. The IMF is looking to tie your credit score to the things you search, probably making all likelihood of your having a decent credit score not viable if that happens. It's not going to happen though. But the days of sophisticated and expensive to everybody, if ever there were a day, is definitely behind us. But about a decade ago, the cost of a lithium-ion battery pack was around $1,110 per kilowatt hour. That figure now stands at roughly $137 per kilowatt hour and likely to plunge to about $100 per kilowatt hour in the next couple of years, said Fast Company, citing a new clean energy report from Bloomberg. If you look at the remarkable cost reduction over the last decade and what's expected over the next few years, and pair that with escalating policy measures in Europe and expected in the US and China, then you have this very powerful combination of factors to underpin EV uptake starting now. The report cited some Chinese battery packs already cost around $100 per kilowatt hour, mark the line in the sand that will allow automakers to make mass market electric vehicles while turning a profit. They will continue and accelerate over the next few years. Within 4 years, major automakers should be able to produce and sell mass-market electric vehicles at the same price and with the same margin as internal combustion engine equivalents. UBS's Swiss investment bank published a note earlier this year that said Volkswagen could be the first global automaker to make money selling electric vehicles with profits materializing as early as 2022. And of course, that's the third aspect here, is not only to make it affordable, but these companies have to turn a profit to incentivize them to invest. I was investing in Blink and NIO at one point. NIO is said to be the Chinese Tesla. EV is the future. The future is now. It's happening. We're, digital currency and electric cars. No, in head-to-head comparison, consumers would still prefer an electric Audi, BMW, or Mercedes over a Tesla. The key issue is that these brands still lack competitive products, which could change in 2021. While gamma squeezes have pushed the market cap of Tesla to $629 billion, the prospects of cheaper batteries and mass market electric vehicles by mainstream automakers may be a headwind for the company. And that's really where it is. It's like when the main companies that are able to compete, and Ford, I believe it was Ford, was supposed to be working with Nikola to create automated trucks and automated 18-wheelers, and then of course Nikola was found to be falsifying their demo test of their truck. They put their truck on a gradient hill and let that bad boy just slide on down. For viewers, we're watching the Boston Dynamics unmanned ground vehicle, and that's really what they are. Kind of do their dance, work through their paces. Oh, and then you have a break dancer. But I digress. We were reading the other day about the FAA is going to allow unmanned aerial vehicles over public areas and even at night in some cases, right? And this is what I was talking about unmanned ground vehicles also probably being included in that, involved in, retail distribution, food delivery, all sorts of things. Can't wait till they automate trash pickup. What else? Street sweepers going to be automated. This is the future. This is the future. The future is now. This is an amazing time, but not. It's an amazing time, just not necessarily for people. But it is, but kind of not really. You have to take the good with the bad. I'm sorry. This is really the level of articulation in their ambulation is really something else. They were showing the video of the breakdancer to compare, and give it another 5 years and you will actually probably see that level of musculature articulation happening. You know, you just, but anyway, I digress. Last but not leastly, and all of this stems from military research. The Boston Dynamics dog was developed first as the mule in order to carry, weight load and carry equipment, have high capacity weight load bearing, things like that. And it's just continued forth, and now, as I mentioned earlier, it's in the TV show War of the Worlds. What you're looking at now for for listeners, I keep saying viewers, for listeners, we are watching at DARPA. They developed a tire that is able to inflate, deflate, and manipulate itself to become treaded as well. And that's in an instant. So basically, it's making all vehicles all-terrain, at least those that have these tires. The mechanism was developed at Carnegie University and is part of DARPA's GXV-T program. Don't ask me what those designations are. You know how the military is. But it's just a mashable video. It's a fascinating thing. But a lot of our greatest technological innovations from the internet, which started as DefenseNet, the defense network from ARPA, Advanced Research. I forgot what the other A is. But I think, no, it's just 1A, Advanced Research Project, right? And then they became DARPA later. I digress. But the internet started as a defense network. Plastics, everything, pretty much everything decent, like everything wonderful that we use comes from the war machine or a time in which a war was happening. World War II war machine brought everything, like I mentioned, from the use of plastics to petroleum, which then led to cosmetics. That's how we got makeup. And I digress. You get it. So, what we have here is another failure of monumental proportions. And it's like, one would love to cite racism, but I think this is a case of the militarized law enforcement of this, in this case, Chicago, failing, being what they are, jackbooted fucking oppressors. I didn't know about this. I didn't know. I had another one I didn't know about. In 2019, back in February, there was a botched police raid on a young woman's house of the name of Anjanette Young. I say botched raid, and for viewers or for listeners, I'm gonna get it. Listeners, we're watching a video of the body cam of the failed raid, apparently, and well, I say failed because they broke into the wrong house, and I'm gonna guess this was a no-knock raid, but there's been developments as they say in this case, involving the mayor. Calls for the mayor to be released. The calls for the mayor to be fired and things like that. This will actually follow into yet another mayor and calls for that mayor to be fired, but for a completely different reason. But we'll start here. Approximately 150 people this on December 27th gathered near Chicago Police headquarters to protest the wrongful raid of Anjanette Young in February 2019. Young's house was raided when police intended to raid the residence next door. Young was handcuffed naked in the incident and was told to calm down as she told officers they had the wrong house. The officers involved have been placed on desk duty. Remember, no criminal charges, and usually they don't get fired. Generally, they go on administrative leave, but no one died, so I guess desk duty is suitable. But protesters Sunday said those involved should be fired. Reassigned to desk duty is not discipline. It's a comfort zone in the wintertime in Chicago. In the fallout, Corporation Counsel Mark Fleshner has resigned from his office. Mayor Lightfoot and Anjanette Young are slated to go ahead with the meeting, adhering to conditions set forth by Young's attorney. But what's happened is that they released information and documents regarding the raid, and the mayor said it was pretty bad. Yes, I'd say breaking into the wrong house, handcuffing that person naked is pretty bad. I'm glad they're not dead. Like, that's what I was expecting when I first started hearing tidbits about this. I was like, oh my God, another one like this is happening. So, I mean, that. So WGN TV reads, in the aftermath of the release of the body cam footage from a wrongful raid in 2019, Mayor Lori Lightfoot's office announced the disclosure of emails and other documents related to the botched raid, which shows she was informed it was pretty bad. Among the documents released include emails from the mayor's office, as well as the response from the Civilian Office of Police Accountability and the Chicago Police Department to CBS's 2's Freedom of Information Act request, a FOA. The emails released, which date back to November 2019, detail communication between City of Chicago employees and Chicago Police regarding Freedom of Information Act requests from both Young and CBS 2, as well as how Lightfoot was informed of the incident. Lightfoot was told that there was a pretty bad wrongful raid that was going to be released to the media and informed her of the FOA request being denied. Lightfoot was also included in her calendar. She also included in her calendar for November 11th, 2019, the day in which Lightfoot staff informed her that the FOA request was in the works and would be released to her that next day. It sounds like she denied the FOA request. The document released from the mayor's office also had production of the claims file in response to a FOA request from Chicago police. The mayor initially denied her office knowing anything about the incident, but later recanted, saying she was actually alerted about the case with a few details last year. The email also shows that the city planned to release this body cam footage with Anjanette Young that month, but the Civilian Office of Police Accountability opened an investigation and then said that the video release would interfere. How exactly would that interfere in the investigation? You're conducting an internal investigation. Well, it is the civilian office, so I'm not sure how much authority that they have, but I'm not sure how that would interfere. How exactly would so you would be notifying the public by allowing the media to have it. But like the thing is, how would that it's always excuses. Always. The email shows, nearly 2 years later, the 12 officers involved are on desk duty. The law department's top attorney has resigned, and former federal judge Ann Claire Williams is leading an outside law firm's investigation. In addition to Mayor Lightfoot's office releasing documents, Chicago Police Superintendent David Brown announced Wednesday night the department publicly released 2 dash cam videos and documents related to the search warrant. And we can search through it below. So what it seems like is they placated long enough to let it kind of quote unquote blow over. Like usual. So all of this came from this showing up, and I was just like, who is Lightfoot? That's a weird name. What are they talking about? Is this over masks? And it wasn't. But this one is over masks. Yes. But we'll get to that in a second. For listeners, there's a GOP mayor in Kansas that's receiving threats and is thinking about resigning from her post because she supported a mask mandate. We'll get to that in a second. Let me finish this up here. So lastly, in regards to Anjanette Young, a group of activists gathered at City Hall today to demand the resignation of Mayor Lightfoot as the political fallout over the raid continues. After publicized back and forth, Anjanette Young and Lightfoot met for the first time on Thursday. The two sides said the meeting was productive. Today we met and had a lengthy, very candid and productive conversation about the unacceptable raid on Mrs. Young's house and her pain. We also discussed this from Lightfoot. We also discussed a number of systemic changes necessary to address the wrongs done not only to Miss Young but also other victims. We both acknowledged that today's conversation was but a step towards Miss Young's healing. Today's conversation was not a resolution to the problematic issues that both parties acknowledge exist, which led to the events of February 21, 2019 at Miss Young's home. However, there could be no resolution without first engaging in substantive conversation. We are both committed to continuing to identify areas of common ground relating to these issues and working towards necessary policy changes together. Okay. On Wednesday afternoon, the mayor's office released several documents related to the case, including this back and forth and what looks like the desire to stop a FOA request. The desk dutying of these 12 officers in order to placate people long enough to allow it to blow over is what happened. Okay. Mayor Lightfoot, Eric Russell said, her New Year's resolution should be to resign. Russell and others stood outside City Hall on Thursday and said a series of damning emails should be the last straw. The recent release of emails associated with the botched raid of our dear sister, Anjanette Young, must be made the last straw in a long list of failures by this administration. The mayor initially denied that she knew anything about the humiliating video of the woman standing handcuffed and naked, but later backtracked. In the email dump, an email shows the mayor was informed there was a pretty bad wrongful raid. And it's like, it'd be difficult to not feel like it's racial when you treat people like animals, and it's like I keep because there are this is what would be considered procedural misconduct, and there's procedural misconduct of this kind all over the place, and it takes place mainly in large major metropolitan major inner cities where there happens to be large concentrations of minorities. So I would like to argue that I would like to argue I mean, I'd like to argue everybody in a city gets treated like this. I mean, everybody in a city that meets those that level, that, you know what I mean? People people because I'm like, dude, because I've been through a lot of cities, and in all the cities I'm treated like shit by cops. But in all the cities that I'm treated like shit by cops with, I'm with black people, white people, Asian people, Spanish people. We're all being treated like trash because we're all destitute, right? We're all homeless and none of us have any money. We also happen to be in poor areas in large cities. So that's why I'm always like, yeah, I hear you. Definitely, you know what I mean? There's racism abound, and cops are just another gang. At the same time, there's a lot of poor white folks, a lot of poor Chinese folks, a lot of poor, Muslim folks, Arab folks, I should say, excuse me. And they get the boot too. They live in these areas too. And I just, so it's like, it's definitely a thing where it's a demographic, it's a class issue, as well as a race issue. Same situation, but the black lady is an Arab lady. Do you think she'd be treated any different? Because she got a fucking hijab on? Nah, bruh. She getting handcuffed, ass naked, just like this unfortunate lady did too. Straight up. It's definitely a demographic. They treat people in poor areas, in large cities, where nobody's got nothing, like they are nothing. Facts. Now, let's get to this. This is hilarious. GOP mayor resigns after she received threats for backing mask mandate. I'm sorry, I thought she was considering resignation. She already resigned. This happened 2 weeks ago, 15 days ago to be exact, on the 16th. And I hadn't heard of this. I mean, again, in the mainstream media, right, pandemic news dominates. And it's not necessarily important pandemic news. It's just pandemic news. So the GOP mayor resigned. A Republican mayor from Western Kansas resigned from her post over safety concerns on Tuesday after she received threats from people over publicly supporting a mask mandate as a means to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. You cannot fight illegitimate governance with violence. And that's not how this works. Because all right, so I had to bring it up. So I was speaking with someone who I consider, a peer, an intellectual peer of mine, about the situation regarding revolution, right? Eric talking about revolution. First of all, revolution will not be televised, so it's not like something is going to happen on television, it's going to spark it off. It's been happening, right? It's this slow rumble that's led to the stark revelations, that's led to the vast movement of passion and conviction that unfortunately is untethered and not guided. And so what ends up happening is he speaks from, the violent revolutionary standpoint, like, if we get to a point where there's critical legislation or like a politician doing this and that, then, I'll think of stuff like that. I'm just like, really? So there seems to be nothing within what you're saying to leave any room for dialogue. That is to say, are you going to purge anyone who disagrees with you and your politics? I mean, how do you get anything to function other than complete authoritarianship that way? You're just going to bomb everyone into agreeing with you. So that's terrorism. And in the long term, that is proven ineffective. Right? Asymmetric warfare has to lead. What it is asymmetric warfare is used to push people to the political table. That's the point. Is that at the end of the day, there's billions upon billions of people on this planet, and you cannot establish yourself in any way, shape, or form as a sovereign, whether it be city, nation, state, or otherwise, through perpetual violence. It's not going to work. And you can't get government to respond to you because government, it on the face of it, respond to public will. And so if you're, bombing everything, you just create and sow fear. And that will be to their advantage, as we've seen with things like 9/11. Well, really with everything. 9/11 to this pandemic. But there's been some recently breaking news. There's been some interesting developments. We'll get to that in a second. Let me finish this up here. So Forbes reads, a Republican mayor from Western Kansas resigned from her positions over safety concerns on Tuesday after she received threats from people for publicly supporting a mask mandate as a means to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. Joyce Warshaw, the mayor of Dodge City, said that she was concerned about her safety after she received threats via phone and email for being quoted in the USA Today article supporting a mask mandate. Warshaw told the Daily Globe that she did not have any regrets in voting in favor of the mask mandate, which was passed by a city's commission of 4-1 last month, according to a separate Associated Press report. Now, if that's how you feel about the mask mandate, fine. My whole thing about it is there have been pseudo mask mandates in places like New York, California, and that hasn't helped. Japan is being hailed for its mandate for masks and having it stat low, but apparently that's not necessarily the case because they've just had they've had an explosion like everyone else has had an explosion. So it's amusing to me, again, the use of governance versus reality. We looked yesterday, 80 million infected, 1.6 million dead. That's a 2% death rate, which is the flu. Again, I'm not dismissing the possibility of severity. What I am saying is, shouldn't we look at the importance of all statistics, all numbers here, not just the death rate and the infection rate? Oh my God. And even that, you're looking at the death and the infection rate side by side, and it's like, well, wait, it only compounds to 2%. Shouldn't we take caution? Yes, it's a novel virus, but this is going to be endemic like the other coronaviruses are. Why is it that we're still maneuvering government oversight as though we need this to be completely eradicated? This is not the measles. This is not polio. This is not Ebola. But to continue, Warsaw told NBC News that she had received threats, accusations, and actions towards her family and passed some threatening emails to the police. Now that does not warrant, given everything I just said, it does not warrant violence. It doesn't warrant threats of violence because, again, that's not going to move the needle in the direction you want it to, and that will only sow more chaos and more fear, which will allow them which will be an opportunity to capitalize on. Life has dealt out many challenges in our world that have perhaps caused many people to act inappropriately. But I do not feel safe in this position anymore, and I am hopeful in removing myself. This anger, accusations, and abuse will not fall on anyone else and will calm down. That's not how this works. And yet again, of course, they state one stat, and not really with any context. 4,914, that's the number of total people that have cases in Ford County, where Dodge City is located. The Associated Press notes the county has around 33,000 residents, so that's an eighth, 8, 16, 24, 32. Yeah, so that's about an eighth of residents, I think. I think I have my math correct. And so, I understand that's something to be concerned with. How many of them have died? How many of them are in critical or have been in critical care? How many have recovered? They used to do that in the beginning. That used to be something that was important to take note of in the beginning. But I digress. We just pretty much read about this, so we don't need to continue with this. Herd immunity. Oh, God, let's not go there. But recently what just happened tonight, a Canadian official resigns after taking tropical vacation amid lockdown. Yet again, we have more examples of the upper echelon, the elite, the rulership expressing their hypocrisy. Now, is it hypocrisy if you yourself do not believe the things that's coming out of your mouth? Well, of course that's hypocrisy. Let me rephrase that. It is hypocrisy, but it's like it isn't as though they are being hypocritical out of being forced. They don't have a gun to their head, right? They don't actually believe that people should stay home and not see their families. right? They're just it's all lip service. Or do they actually believe that and then, begrudgingly go and see their family? Oh shucks, I got to be around my loved ones. Gee golly williker. Like, I don't understand how this can happen so often globally even. All right, because mainly we've seen it from Western mayors, governors, but we've seen a few. I think someone in Germany and the Netherlands has been up to the same hypocrisy. But I digress. Uh, it's amazing to me, given the age of digital information. Well, no, actually, as we'll see later on, there's an article we'll read. Cable news networks see big gains in viewership during tumultuous 2020. Mainstream media feeds off of fear. And, Noam Chomsky manufactured consent. The reality is that as long as they can keep pumping out the same narrative, irrelevant of whether it's true or not, it's got to have some validity, right? Or else they wouldn't be saying it repeatedly. It's an amazing, amazing world we live in. So, Canadian official resigns after taking tropical vacation amid lockdown, says New York Post. Canadian government official was forced to resign after posting a video pretending to be at home on coronavirus lockdown when he was actually vacationing in St. Bart's. That's even worse. That's a new one. That's a new low. I haven't heard of that yet. He faked being home. Well, okay, so Chris Cuomo, right, Pedro, he was caught actually being out with his family. He got harassed by a biker, what he called a fat tire biker, after he ranted on his radio show about how he didn't want to be on the radio. Hey, guy, I'll take that spot gladly. I would love to have people listen in on, someone speaking about a variety of things from both a empirical and a biased position, right? Because CNN's garbage, we know that. But to continue, Rod Phillips, Ontario's finance minister, shared a Christmas Eve clip of himself in a sweater sipping eggnog in front of a fireplace and thanking Canadians for avoiding non-essential travel during the holidays. I want to thank every one of you for what we are doing to protect our most vulnerable, he said. The post on his Twitter account also suggested he was homebound in snowy Ontario, including a December 17th photo of himself pouring Canadian maple syrup over pancakes and one about visiting local businesses on Christmas Eve. Turns out he was actually in the Caribbean island of St. Bart's, a favorite playground of the rich and famous, since December 13th. What a surprise. Opposition parties and health officials called for Phillips to be fired from the cabinet. He was ordered to return, and Premier Doug Ford promised to have a very tough conversation with Phillips. Later Thursday, Ford said he had accepted Phillips's resignation. In a statement, Phillips said he deeply regretted taking the beach vacation. It was a mistake and I apologize. I left on a personally paid for trip to St. Bart's on December 13th following the end of the legislative session. At the airport Thursday, he told reporters he'd made a dumb mistake. No, buddy, the mistake was thinking that no one was going to see you. And so you got caught. And that's what you get. But they generally do get caught. It's like you're going out into public. But, these guys and gals, they have such a high sense of themselves, really. They're so self-absorbed and within their own, self-constructed bubble of pathological lies that they don't think they're going to get caught. It's amazing. Sixth Circuit overturns Lucas County order closing schools. Now, children are a sensitive subject for obvious reasons. They are the future. The whole thing for me is that given the statistics and given the measures that have already been taken that haven't worked, why aren't we looking towards a more functional society integrated with COVID? We're going to have to live with this. So, honestly, as long as they have some sort of provision, something in place to deal and to manage, I don't see why this isn't a good thing. Moments ago, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals issued an order blocking the Lucas County Health Board from enforcing their orders closing all in-person education for children in grades 7 through 12. The following statement is from Citizens for Community Values President Aaron Bear. The First Amendment does not take a holiday break. The First Amendment doesn't go on holiday, son. It was clear from the outset that the Lucas County Health Board's order closing schools violated the Constitution. It is indefensible and irrational to block children from accessing in-person instruction while allowing casinos, gyms, liquor stores, and other public places to remain open. then that's true. And that's one of the first arguments that was made. It's like, well, why are you closing critical infrastructure and leaving things like strip clubs and not strip clubs, leaving things like bars and casinos open? And I mean, where is this located? Where is this located? Columbus, Ohio, I presume. It's been different for every place, obviously. And the whole thing about it is that, this was the litmus test, right? When we meet because last time we had this sort of litmus test with 9/11, we failed miserably. The Patriot Act was passed, almost unanimously, and no one seemed to argue or care. To this day, we're still dealing with it. But when security meets safety, when security meets liberty, civil liberty, which is more important, and those who would, how's the quote go? Those who would give up liberty for security deserve neither. The whole thing about it is look at the reality of it, right? For example, this is a tweet from Brian Darby, but these are pictures from Reuters and from CBS. It's a picture for our listeners of New York's Times Square, and it's fucking desolate. It's just like, it is, I've never seen anything like this in my entire life, ever. I don't know if there's ever been anything like this. But in Wuhan, CBS News, once the coronavirus epicenter, thousands pack Wuhan, China, and let the balloons go and celebrate the new year. And they're ass to ass, and it doesn't look like they have masks. I mean, I can't really see. The picture's kind of blurry. But, yeah. It continues to be the great joke for everybody, I think, really the world, that China is at an all-time low of approval, and yet has made its mark. And here's the thing, it isn't as though I'm against Chinese ascendancy. This is about the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. They are ruthless totalitarians that imprison their own people. And this all began with a revolution that led to a mass purging, which really was like a genocide, and a famine that killed tens of millions of people and lasted decades until they were allowed to sell and eat animals. And that's how this wet market thing, by the way, developed. It was seen as it was already being done, and then they legalized it to make it more prolific and used it as a way to feed the people, because they had consolidated, nationalized all their resources and functions, and failed miserably to service the country because they were servicing themselves. All right, so next up, we have the employee intentionally removing the COVID-19 vaccine from the fridge and ruining more than 500 doses. We are really reaching a sort of critical mass, right? I always talk about the precipice humanity is staring off of. The pressure, the level of anxiety, the level of stress is something that I haven't seen since 9/11, since the pre-9/11, well, the just after post 9/11 world. The tension was high, but it was nationalistic tension, right? We as a nation looked towards the concept, the ideology of Islam, unfortunately, a whole ideology, and put the label of enemy on it, and villainized a religion. But in this case, it's all internal, and it's all in grouping, and it's seen on every level, political, and really it's all ideological, and it's like political, involving health, involving the police and law enforcement. And I mean, it's becoming overt at this point. We saw a staffer get attacked, one of Cuomo's staffer get attacked with a brick. We've seen a lot of partisan violence, overtly partisan violence. And now we're starting to see those. We don't know what the motivation was behind this, but one could speculate. But let's read what USA Today has to say. Advocate Aurora Health says a now fired employee intentionally removed 57 vials of the Moderna vaccine from a refrigerator last weekend, causing them to become ineffective and to be discarded. Each vial contains enough for 10 vaccinations. Initially, Aurora was led to believe the removal was an error, but Wednesday, the employee acknowledged that they intentionally removed the vaccine from refrigeration, according to a statement from a healthcare provider. Grafton Police Department said in a statement late Wednesday that it was notified by Aurora shortly after 6 p.m. regarding an employee tampering with vials of the COVID-19 vaccine at its hospital. The statement goes on to say that the incident is being investigated by the FBI and the FDA. Aurora said the action by the employees is a violation of their core values. The employee was fired, and Aurora said it notified appropriate authorities for further investigation. Aurora said no other employees were involved and that it plans to release more information on Thursday. Its statement continues, "We continue to believe that vaccination is our way out of the pandemic. We are more than disappointed that with this individual's actions will result in a delay of more than 500 people receiving the vaccine." The vials were removed Friday and most were discarded Saturday. Clinicians were still able to administer some of the vaccine from the vials within the allowable 12-hour post-refrigeration window, but had to discard most of it. The Moderna vaccine can be stored at freezer temperatures for up to 6 months and is stable at regular refrigerator temperatures for 30 days, making it simpler to transport than the Pfizer vaccine. But once thawed, the vaccine cannot be refrozen. At room temperature, the Moderna vaccine can keep for up to 12 hours. When the first doses of the Pfizer vaccine, which must be kept at ultra-cold temperatures of -70, arrived in Wisconsin in mid-December, state health officials did not disclose the 8 regional hubs where they were being stored, citing security reasons, and saying they'd consult with the Department of Homeland Security. Oh my God, have you ever heard of something like this with a vaccine before? Isn't that interesting? The level of animosity and distrust, and also, again, we looked at this yesterday, right? With the percentage rate of, AEIF, acute, or shoot, I forgot what it. AEIFs are what the CDC consider anaphylactic reactions. They have another terminology, but it's basically having an allergic reaction. And it was like 1 in 1 million for the measles shot. In the polio, I think it was like 2 in 1.5 or 2 million. We are seeing numbers of reactions that are unlike any other vaccine that we've seen before. At least one that's been out and used in the public, right? We've seen the facial fillers, which millions of people get per year. We've seen reactions with people with facial fillers. And then we saw a doctor in Boston yesterday have a severe reaction, and he had a shellfish allergy. So take that as you will. But as we pile these up, they do point towards something. And that's the whole point here, is just to kind of follow the trail. Right, from along the watchtower, we'll just observe and see and take note and archive and put the pieces together as they arrive. That's how you do things. That's critical thinking. It's fascinating. It's fun. You speculate and you postulate in your head, and you present theories, and you seek out things to disprove yourself, because you certainly don't want to get a confirmation bias. That's fucking easy these days. And you have a good time with it. It can be fun trying to understand the world around you. I promise. So, to support the USA Today article, we have something from the AP. Wisconsin hospital worker arrested for spoiled vaccine doses. That's interesting. The USA article kind of gets right to it. He intentionally removed them. He's like, oh, they were spoiled, and I guess it was his fault. All right. But authorities arrested a suburban Milwaukee pharmacist suspected of deliberately ruining hundreds of doses of coronavirus vaccine by removing them from refrigeration for 2 nights. The arrest marks another setback in what has been a slower, messier start to vaccinate Americans that public health officials had expected. Leaders in Wisconsin and other states have been begging the Trump administration for more doses as healthcare workers and senior citizens line up for the life-saving vaccine. Police in Grafton, about 20 miles north of Milwaukee, said the Advocate Aurora health pharmacist was arrested on suspicion of reckless endangerment, adulterating a prescription drug, and criminal damage to property, all felonies. The pharmacist has been fired, and police said in a news release that he was in jail. There you go. I was like, wait, this guy didn't get arrested? Police did not identify the pharmacist, saying he's not yet been formally charged. You see, they didn't even mention that in the USA Today article. And this is what I'm saying. You gotta corroborate information with multiple sources. His motive remains unclear, though. Police said that detectives believe he knew the spoiled doses would be useless, and people who received them would mistakenly think they'd been vaccinated when they hadn't. It's an interesting line. Perhaps that was the motive. And then he pointed out, of course, sacrificing himself on the altar of liberty. No. But in all seriousness, perhaps that was his motive, was to find out the efficacy of the vaccine. things have reached that fever pitch because of the lack of transparency. Again, Pfizer's information on their data, the data on their trials, only really started to come out right before they got EUA approval. Okay. Advocate Aurora Healthcare Chief Medical Group Officer. Wow. One more time. Advocate Aurora Healthcare Chief Medical Group Officer Jeff Barr told reporters during a teleconference Thursday afternoon that the pharmacist deliberately removed 57 vials that held hundreds of doses of the Moderna vaccine from refrigeration at a Grafton Medical Center overnight on Christmas Eve and Day, then returned them, then left them out again on the night of Christmas Day into Saturday. The vials contained enough doses to inoculate 570 people. The pharmacy technician discovered the vials outside the refrigerator Saturday morning. Barr said the pharmacist initially said he had removed the vials to access other items in the refrigerator and had inadvertently failed to put them back. The Moderna vaccine is viable for 12 hours outside refrigeration, so workers used the vaccine to inoculate 57 people before discarding the rest. Police said the discarded doses were worth between $8,000 and $11,000. Price tag. Always a price tag. Because somebody's got to get paid for all of that. This is why they introduced vaccine distribution funding into the coronavirus bill, the stimulus bill. Barr said health system officials grew more suspicious of the pharmacist as they reviewed the incident. After multiple interviews, the pharmacist acknowledged Wednesday that he did it on purpose over the 2 nights. That means that the doses people received Saturday were all but useless. Moderna had told the Aurora that there's no safety concerns, but the hospital system is closely monitoring the people who received the spoiled doses. Barr declined to comment on the pharmacist's motive. He said hospital system security protocols are sound. This was a situation involving a bad actor. And so, yes, they go into always the COVID stat at the end. But it's getting overt. And, it's really a horrible time for there to be a pandemic given the battle that's being waged for Medicare for all. I mentioned at the top of the show, Force the Vote, hashtag Force the Vote, town hall was held on the 30th, I think, yesterday. And, the whole thing about it is that we're the only, first world country that does not have Medicare for all. Between 30 and 60 million people per year die because of not having health care. And 14 million people just lost their health care due to the pandemic this past year. So now more than ever, we need relief from, at the very least, the for-profit medical industry tattooing, every last dollar that we can come up with now. I mean, it's the middle of a pandemic. If you can't get Medicare for all, universal health care for people during the middle of a pandemic, right, an alleged health crisis, irrelevant of where you stand, you're not going to get it. And so, since people don't even think that this would pass, it would be nice to know on hand who exactly stands against universal health care during a fucking pandemic when you already have millions of people who have lost their health care and already millions of people who didn't have health care to begin with. Drug makers to hike prices for 2021 as pandemic political pressure puts revenues at risk, reads Reuters. Drug makers, including Pfizer, Sanofi, and GlaxoSmithKline, plan to raise U.S. prices on more than 300 drugs starting January 1st, tomorrow, according to drug makers and data analyzed by healthcare research firm 3 Axis Advisors. The hikes come as drug makers are reeling from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has reduced doctor visits and demand for some drugs. They're also fighting new drug price cutting rules from the Trump administration, which will reduce the industry's profitability. The companies kept their price increases at 10% or below, and the largest drug companies to raise prices so far, Pfizer and Sanofi, kept nearly all of their increases 5% or less. 3 Axis is a consulting firm that works with pharmacist groups, health plans, and foundation on drug pricing and supply chain issues. GSK did raise prices on 2 vaccines, shingles vaccine and diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis vaccine pediatrics by 7% and 8.6% respectively. Teva Pharmaceuticals hiked prices on 15 drugs, including Austedo, which treats rare neurological disorders, and asthma steroid Qvar, which together grossed more than $650 million in sales in 2019 and saw price hikes between 5% and 6%. Teva hiked prices for some drugs, including muscle relaxant Amarex and narcolepsy drug Nuvigil. And it's just, it is amazing. And again, we've seen this time and time again where you don't let a good crisis go to waste. We've seen billion-dollar companies gain over $1 trillion collectively amongst themselves, billionaires, and of course, billion-dollar companies have made record sales as well. We've seen the stock market hit an all-time high. There's plenty of money floating around. It is not getting to the people who need it, and still, we can't get Medicare for all. We can't get universal health care, and pharmaceutical companies have nothing better to do than to use the health crisis that should be the excuse to get universal health care, which we can't get, to hike up prices for drugs we can't afford. That's happening. Like, that is our reality. The increases come as pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer are playing hero by developing vaccines for COVID-19 in record time that are also causing a record high percentage of anaphylactic reactions. The hikes could help make up the lost revenue as doctor visits and new prescriptions plummeted during the global lockdown. Pfizer plans to raise prices on more than 60 drugs by between 0.5% and 5%. Those include roughly 5% increases on some of its top sellers like rheumatoid arthritis treatment, Xeljanz, and cancer drugs, Ibrance and Alida. So it's all drugs for rare diseases and critical things that elderly need. That's excellent. Speaking of the elderly, Daily Beast reports MAGA retirement enclave is ground zero in Florida vaccine shit show. Always with the eloquent wording. I'm not sure what this is about. I found the headline interesting because of the sort of biased nature of it. I'm going to go ahead. I love to just guess. I love to just speculate. I love speculation. I'm guessing these are a bunch of GOP Trump supporters who are anti-vaxxers or anti-maskers at the very least. And unfortunately, it's a retirement home, which, is the highest at-risk demographic. And there's a vaccine rollout that has failed miserably. Yet another one. Let's read. On Christmas Eve, Dr. Jeff Lowenkron, a top doctor in the Villages, delivered an ominous holiday message to residents about the spread of coronavirus in Florida's most politically infamous retirement community. As the chief medical officer for the Villages Health, a healthcare provider that operates 6 clinics in the sprawling Central Florida development, Lowenkron has access to real-time stats about new cases and hospitalizations. But what about ICU admissions? That's the thing. New cases, hospitalizations, and hospitalizations that lead to ICU admissions. Because just going there, staying there overnight for observation, and leaving counts as a hospitalization. And I don't think if you have, 2/3 of your visits being those that you should react as though everyone's dying. Therein lies the point. But I digress. According to his December 24th weekly email newsletter, a copy of which was shared with the Daily Beast, Lowenkron revealed that the 2 main hospitals were treating 94 patients with COVID-19, of whom 19 were in the intensive care units. There we go. That is critical. So, 10% of 94 is 9. So, it's 20%. Right. It's 20%. Okay, so I would be concerned. I'd be concerned. Yeah. You see how easy that was? You see how fucking easy that was? 94 people have COVID. 19 of them went to intensive care. Wow, that's something like a what is it, like a 10%, 20% of them went to intensive care. That's pretty severe. That's far more than 2%. And that's why, again, I don't like Gavin Newsom, but I do applaud his ICU availability related COVID lockdown measure, right? If availability for ICU gets to 15% or lower, lockdown in those areas and in those regions alone. Perfect, right? If 20% of people who are getting this are going to intensive care, shut it down. Like that's really high. Local hospitalization numbers, because remember, I hate to keep referring to Songbird. Remember in the movie Songbird, they had 54% mortality, right? And it's something like 45 or 43% of people who go to intensive care without being elderly. This is just in general. End up on ventilators, and most people who end up on ventilators don't come off of them, right? So you're seeing half of those who go into intensive care on ventilators, most who come on ventilators don't come off of them. That means half of those people going to intensive care probably die within 2 weeks or so. That's a reality that you can react to, straight up, real talk. So local hospitalization numbers for COVID, which actually I would change that to local hospitalization and intensive care admission numbers for COVID, are at the highest they have been and rising. The village's health has seen an increase in positive test numbers in our sites as well as among our staff who are treating patients. But Lowenkron didn't give a timetable for when villages could expect to get vaccinated. This, even though Governor Ron DeSantis had just days earlier used the Trumpian retiree stronghold as the backdrop for his big announcement that, unlike much of the rest of the country, Florida would be prioritizing senior citizens over essential workers. So I see. This is a quote from never mind. On Tuesday, Shirley Sands, a 73-year-old retired nurse, said she had not gotten any more information about the village's health vaccine rollout plan since Lowenkron's mass email. There seems to be no plan. If there is a plan, most of the residents certainly don't know about it. What is certain is that 5 Republican villagers who have held elected office or positions within local GOP clubs were among those who received the vaccine last week. More cronyism, more favoritism. When DeSantis held the press conference at the village's hospital, the Republican villagers' starring roles ignited criticism from their Democratic counterparts in the editorial board of the online newspaper, The Village's News, which was the first to report on the quintet's Republican connections, as well as their ties to Mark Gary Morse. See, and you look to the left, you look to the right, and there's favoritism all around. This is that one that's actually surprising. The article goes on a little bit more about their favoritism and DeSantis being pointed out as a hypocrite, as he is, as most of these governors have been known to be. See, I love this. That's what I mean. Everybody's doing it. Everybody's participating in the proletariat bourgeoisie get down boogaloo hell show. So, Georgia, GOP candidate to quarantine days before runoff election. Poor Perdue, right on the cusp of a very critical, I wouldn't say victory, right on the cusp of a very critical race. Sorry, guy. How about you use all that corruption money there? And I mean, here's the thing, is that he tested negative, but he was told that he had interacted. And that's what I find sketchy. He was just kind of told that he interacted with someone who tested positive for COVID-19. And so automatically he has to quarantine. He's a public figure. It's not like he can hide something like that. The Hill reads, Perdue announced Thursday he will quarantine after being exposed to someone who was infected, taking him off the campaign trail just days before his crucial Senate runoff. Perdue's team said in a statement that the senator was informed Thursday he had been in contact with someone on the campaign who tested positive for coronavirus. He was just informed, and that was it. So okay, do you know who? Can you verify that? Well, Perdue and his wife tested negative. They will still quarantine based on guidelines from the CDC. The senator and his wife have been tested regularly throughout the campaign, and the team will continue to follow CDC guidelines. Further information will be provided when available. The campaign did not say in its statement how long Perdue and his wife will be quarantining and did not immediately respond to requests from comment for the Hill. The news comes a day after Perdue attended a campaign event at a brewery in Dalton, Georgia. While Perdue was seen wearing a mask, many in attendance at the event were not wearing face coverings, naturally. That's what I'd say. That's what you get, but he was wearing a mask. But I just 2020 has been a year of revelations, to say the least. But I think that is very strategic, that he was just informed, hey, there's somebody sick, so you gotta go. So the timing of that is very interesting. I don't know if one last day of campaigning would really help that much. However, I'm not sure if he will be able to go out and be seen in person during the runoff itself. The runoff's on Tuesday. Yeah, I think he will be in quarantine during the runoff. That's pretty critical. So, sorry, guy. Not really, don't care. But no, actually, the reality is control of the Senate is really everything right now. Control of the House, control of the Senate, Congress is where it's at. As you've seen with the defense bill, right? The veto of the defense bill, they can override his veto with a veto-proof majority. McConnell slams Bernie Sanders' defense bill delay as an attempt to defund the Pentagon. So although with a veto-proof majority they can pass a bill and stop the president from stopping the passing of something, signing something, they can then argue amongst themselves and stymie their ability to stop him. So check this out, because remember, right? Mitch McConnell tied the $2,000 stimulus bill after the $600 bill had been signed. The new one, the House passed a new one, and McConnell in the Senate was like, I'm going to attach the 230 repeal from Trump and the election fraud committee request to this, and that's not going to pass. So now Sanders is being accused of holding, and what is he doing? He's holding up the line and forcing them to go through every nook and cranny of regulation, following by the numbers, stymieing everything, and it's bothering Mitch real bad. Gee golly williker. The Independent reads, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell laid into Bernie Sanders for slowing the chamber's override of Donald Trump's veto of a massive military policy bill, saying the progressive senator wants to defund the Pentagon. The Vermont Independent, who caucuses with Democrats, is forcing the Senate to weave through a maze of procedural hurdles before taking a final vote on undoing the president's National Defense Authorization Act veto. He is doing so because Mr. McConnell is refusing to bring to a vote as a standalone bill a House-passed measure increasing from $600 to $2,000 COVID stimulus checks for some Americans. Instead, the Majority Leader made clear during his Wednesday session opening speech that he intends to keep the checks part of a three-part measure that also includes Mr. Trump's demands for a repeal of legal protections for social media companies and a probe of his voting fraud claims, thereby alleviating Mitch McConnell from, needing to do his duty as a representative of, as a representative of the American people and of his constituents in Kentucky to give them money. The Kentucky Republican defended his bundling of those issues as just what the president requested when he threatened last week to block a combination year-end spending bill and COVID relief package. I don't recall that being a request at all. Not only did he hit the ball back at Trump, but he blamed it. Yeah, and it's like everyone saw that address. I don't recall that being the case at all. Mr. McConnell called Mr. Sanders' NDA move a political stunt because he's not being allowed to force a vote on the standalone checks measure unless he gets to muscle through the House-approved measure that the Majority Leader claimed would add $500 billion to the national debt. Minority Leader Chuck Schumer on Tuesday said on the floor he did not want to hear GOP gripes about an aid move to help Americans adding to the deficit because they did so during Mr. Trump's term. They certainly fucking did. I don't want to hear that we can't afford it. The Republicans added nearly $2 trillion to the deficit to give corporations a massive tax cut, let alone the defense budget bill in the first place, okay, and the increases to it that Trump has done. I think we've all come to the conclusion between TARP, the troubled asset relief program under Obama, between the expenditure of the expansion of the military budget under Trump, to the CARES and HEROES Act, we can pull money out of our ass. Okay, when the political will is there, we can pull money out of our ass for anything. That's why, and apparently with Medicare for All, you would earn $10 trillion over a course of time. But anyway, that I've yet to confirm. But the whole thing, this what is it? The 116th Congress has been an entire shit show. I don't even feel like reading that. But what I do want to get into is partisanship. I always want to talk about partisanship and hopefully be as nonpartisan as possible. There's a CNN article, which is a very biased organization, as we well know, about how Atlanta rappers helped flip the White House, helped flip Georgia, turned it purplish blue, which I'm all about. I'm all about, and especially for the black community, trying to get involved and trying to have better understanding. And those two things are required, right? It's faith without works is dead, right? The whole thing about it is it's not enough to have faith in your political system. You can't simply register to vote for a party and think everything's going to turn around. So they talk about, the Georgia runoff and how Atlanta rappers have really been involved. And, Biden's victory was by fewer than 13,000 out of 5 million ballots. So it was extremely slim. And, they talk about Big Boy of Outkast, sent meals to hungry poll workers, Offset of Migos fed folks while waiting in line to vote, 2 Chainz educated ex-convicts on their voting rights, which is really important. And T.I. lent his trap music museum for a voter drive. Earth Gang and Janelle Monáe joined Michelle Obama for voting initiatives. Even exotic dancers, which I find incredible, not necessarily always aligned with hip-hop, but who in Atlanta were integral in promoting the local rap scene before the city's trap music carved out its own subgenre, got in on the politics. Director Angela Barnes saw her viral Get Your Booty to the Poll public service announcement as a means of addressing down-ballot issues and the marginalization of black voters. And I have nothing but the utmost respect for that. The problem is is partisanship, right? So historically speaking, for anyone who knows like Civil War era history, I dabble in all of history. The Democrats, and here's the thing, everything's flipped. So the Democrats initially supported and helped fund and create and construct the KKK, and during the Reconstruction era terrorized black voters. All right? And voter suppression ran rampant because of it. The reality is that the flipping of one side, one state, Southern Democrats, right, used to be the thing, right? And you had a Republican, you had the Southern strategy, and the Republican insurgency occur back in the 70s, and it's been that way for decades. The whole fact of the matter is that Democrat or Republican, these political parties care about the black voting bloc as just that, a voting bloc, and will pander and cater to them however they see fit with lip service and never actually with due diligence, right? It's just like with Hillary Clinton and the hot sauce, and with Kamala Harris and the pot and the Tupac bullshit, both of which happened on the Breakfast Club. I love how they get people on Breakfast Club to show their ass. That's what it's what's surprising to me is how deeply constructive conversations with Charlemagne the God, who I find to be kind of a flippant jerk. But when it comes to politics, I don't know. He may not want to be. Maybe he takes it seriously. Maybe he doesn't want to be perceived as a child or an idiot or uninformed. But he's very, very forward. He's very open. He's very candid, right? That's how you got Joe Biden's lovely "if you don't vote for me, you ain't black" quote. And he's like, dude, it's not even about being black. It's about what you're going to do for black voters. Okay, so now let's go to Ice Cube. Everybody, I was hating on Ice Cube and this and that and the third, and Lil Wayne and this and that and the third. And it's like, whatever happened to the Platinum Plan? Nobody's talking about that anymore. That was a comprehensive plan that was supposed to aim out and help small black businesses and entrepreneurship, help with education. It was a breakdown. It was a plan. You guys know I love a plan, right? All of this lip service is great. All of the rhetoric is fine. And it invigorates people. It gets people passionate. It gets people hopeful. But it's not substantive. And it certainly isn't reflective of the actual the actual history, the political history of what's happened to black people as a whole, in terms of being acknowledged as actually important and relevant and in need of assistance. But, and it's a sad thing because you didn't see animosity from like Ice Cube or Lil Wayne. They said their piece. They spoke in support of the Platinum Plan and things like that. And Ice Cube went on CNN and got, kind of strawmanned, kind of gaslit, not gaslit, but strawmanned by Chris Cuomo, Phaedro. And he just told it like it is. He was like, listen, this wasn't a matter of me supporting Trump. I don't support Trump. I don't support anybody. It's not about, I'm not about that. I'm supporting this plan, and I'm trying to get help, and I'm trying to get assistance from anyone who will listen to me. But that's not important. That's not important. Partisanship is important. Bias is important. Whatever. I just gotta, keep hope alive. But then we go back to this nonsense, back into the fray of bullshit at the end of the show here. Trump's fight to overthrow election now falls to the guy who invented the Q-Cat. I've never even heard of the Q-Cat. There's a picture of it here for listeners, and it's in the shape of like a minx cat, and it's like a white. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I thought it was a vibrator from afar before I read it, but it's not. What's ended up happening is that the Q-Cat is a barcode reader or URL reader. So products with URLs on them, similar to QR codes or something, you could scan it and get a URL and it would pop up automatically instead of just, typing in the URL and hitting enter. So this guy presumes he guess, well, in a hopeless attempt to overthrow or cast suspicion on American election, a ridiculous cast of characters has heeded ongoing President Donald Trump's call to misadventure, including now the inventor of one of the worst gadgets of all time. His name is Jovan Hutton, Pulitzer, and yesterday he gave a poor intimation. Sorry. Wow, Lloyd. Yesterday he gave a poor imitation of a TED Talk before the Georgia State Senate, claiming that he has the ability to prove whether ballots from the 2020 election were real or fake. He introduced himself as a subcommittee of state senators as an inventor and pattern recognition expert just before implying that he's a titan even bigger than Apple and Google combined. I'm on approximately about 12 billion devices globally, he said. We'll definitely grant that Pulitzer does have some credentials in the world of technology. He's responsible for the QCat, a cat-shaped barcode scanner that is widely regarded as one of the worst gadgets ever made. In a 2000 Wall Street Journal review, renowned technology journalist Walt Mossberg wrote that the QCat was unnatural and ridiculous. Rob Bashiza of Boing Boing calls it one of the classic crap gadgets, and Time named it one of the 50 worst inventions ever. Last-ditch Hail Mary if I've ever seen one. But, like I said, I think all claims should be fleshed out. Unfortunately, this article does not do so. So no need to continue reading. It just mocks him. But just before I came on, and we'll finish up with this, apparently CNN is reporting, this is reported from Zero Hedge, tweeted, that as many as 150 members of Congress may object to seating Biden's electors on January 6th. The network also then reported that rule changes will prevent the objections from stopping him from taking office on the 20th. So, of course, and it's like the first thing that comes to mind, which makes sense. Somebody replies, which would explain why so many politicians will pile on this rule is fully understood and followed when it becomes safe to grab as many Trump supporters as possible without really risking much. Grift, baby, grift. The grift is full on, full swing. And even Trump is really grifting at this point, trying to consolidate as many supporters as he can while he's going out the window, going out the door, the window, whenever. MF Doom is dead, by the way. It's crazy. It's so crazy. But I digress. I'm not even going to this. I'm just gonna go and enjoy the new year. There are new things coming, and I am still hopeful, and I will always remain hopeful that going forward, changes, the opportunity for constructive changes and dialogue to happen will be there, and will take the center stage. Maybe not wholeheartedly, but there will be an expansion of it. There will be more dialogue, for sure. But yeah, please like, share, and subscribe. Be hopeful, be well to yourself and to each other. Take care.